Hello, welcome. Uh, this is 8.5, equation of a circle. And we start out with a couple of formulas that we're going to need. The distance formula, x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. And then you take the square root of that to get the distance. This refers to a point. We'll call our first one x1, y1 is just our first point. And our second point would be x2, y2. So it's just some value of x, some value of y, and then some other value of x, some other value of y. And that we plug those values into this formula and we would get the distance from between those 2 points. Or we can use the midpoint formula, and that's some value of x plus some value of some other value of x. And we divide it by 2, and it'll give us the x coordinate of the midpoint between 2 points. And same thing with the y coordinate. Y1 plus y2 divide by 2. It's the average of those points to get the y coordinate of the midpoint. All right, the equation of a circle. Centered at the origin is x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. Some notes here are r is the radius of your circle. And then it's centered at the origin, 0.00. All right, if it's not centered at the origin, if we say that the center is at some point h, comma, k, then the center of the circle is at x minus h squared plus y minus k squared, and that's equal to r squared. Once again, r, the radius is r. All right, let's see what this looks like. So it says, A, find the center and radius given the following equations. So we look at A, the center, since it matches this format, centered at the origin, we know that the center here then is at the point 0, 0. It's the origin. And then the radius is equal to r. If we say we've got x squared plus y squared equals r squared, but in this case we have x squared plus y squared equals 49. So then I'm asking myself, what square is equal to 49? And the radius then is the number whose square is 49, and that would be the radius is, the radius is 7. And so that's our radius, and our center is at 0, 0. All right, once again, over here we'd say our irregular equation is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared, the radius. And so here I can see that 3 x minus h is 3, so my center is at 3, the same as we see from that there. And then y squared is the same as y minus k squared. So I'd say, well, what would k be? It would leave it as just the same y. Y minus what equals y? And the answer there, y minus k what I've subtracted from y. I've subtracted nothing from y minus 0. So in this case, and let me just write that off to the side so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. Y minus k squared, oops, let me erase that. Y minus quantities k squared is equal to y squared. And so I said, well, y minus something equals y. If I just take off the squares, like, what is the value? What would I subtract from y that it's equal to just y? And the answer is 0. So k equals 0. And then the radius, if r squared equals 64, then r equals 8, because 8 squared is 64. All right, let's look at the next example here. Y plus 2 plus y minus 1 squared equals 1. Once again, I'm going to compare it to this general form of the equation, y minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So I'm going to zoom in on this. It's x plus 2 squared. I'm going to try to write this as x minus h. X minus, what do I subtract the same as plus 2? X minus negative 2 is the same as x plus 2. And so my h value is negative 2. And here I can see, so my x minus negative 2, that's h, is negative 2. And then minus 1 minus k, so k equals 1. That's my center. And then my radius, r squared, equals 1. So what number squared is equal to 1? Well, 1. So my radius is equal to 1. And then in D, x minus, so I'm going to say x minus what equals x squared? X minus 0. So I'm just going to write this out and forego writing the general form of the equation. X minus 0 squared is the same as x squared. Plus y minus negative 5 is the same as y plus 5 squared. And that's equal to, here I'm going to write r squared. If r squared equals 6, then I take the square root of both sides. R then is equal to the square root of 6. So my center is at the point 0, negative 5. And my radius is at the point, not the point, the distance is the square root of 6. And then we have, write the equation for the circle given the following. So the center at the origin is 0, 0, and we've already talked about that general form. So we know it's x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Now, if the radius is 8, that means that r squared is 64. So we say y squared plus x squared plus y squared equals 64, and that's our equation. Let's look at B. The center is at -1, 5, and the radius is 4. So we're going to write x minus h, that's x minus -1, put that all in parentheses, square it, plus y minus k, and that's 5, so y minus 5 squared is equal to the radius squared, and the radius is 4, so the radius squared is 16. And at this point, we can take that minus -1 and rewrite it as x plus 1 squared plus y minus 5 squared, and that's equal to 16. And so that's the equation with center at -1, 5, and radius 4. And then we have a circle whose diameter has endpoints -5, 1, 5, and 5, -3. So we need to figure out how long the diameter is, because the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius, or if you will, the radius is equal to the diameter divided by 2. But we first need to know how long is the diameter. So this is where we use the distance formula. The distance is equal to the square root of x1 -1 minus, let's switch this around. x2 is 5 minus -1 squared plus x2 -3, I'm sorry, not x2, y2. y2 is -3 minus 5 squared. And I look at this and say, well, 5 minus -1 is 5 plus 1, and that's 6 squared. And -3 minus 5 is -8. So that's -8 squared. And we take the square root of that whole thing. Then we've got the square root of 36 plus -8 squared is negative times a negative is positive, so that's 64. All of this is equal to the distance. And then the square root of 36 plus 64 is 100. The square root of 100 is, sorry, not the square root of 10. The square root of 100 is equal to 10. Now, that means our diameter is equal to 10, which means that our radius is 10 divided by 2, or 5. Let's go ahead and write that. 10 divided by 2, which is equal to 5. Now, we also need to know the center. Now, the endpoints, if I know the endpoints of a radius, if I know the point that's right in the middle of them, the midpoint, that would give me the center of the circle, the midpoint of my radius. So I need to use the midpoint formula. And the midpoint formula has, we just take -1 plus 5 divided by 2, and 5 plus -3 also divided by 2. And that means that -1 plus 5, is 4 divided by 2, and 5 plus -3, that's 2 divided by 2. And that means that I have the center, which is the midpoint of the diameter, at the point 4 divided by 2, which is 2, and 2 divided by 2, which is 1. Now, I can write my circle equation is x minus 2 squared, taking the 2 there, plus y minus 1 squared is equal to the radius, and the radius you recall is 5, so that's 5 squared, or 25. And that is the equation. All right. Example D, we've got center at origin and contains the point 3,5. Okay. I need the radius. I know its center is at the origin and it contains the point 3,5. So I can use the distance formula. The distance is equal to the square root of x2, we'll say, is 3, minus the origin point, which is 0, squared, plus 5 minus the origin, also 0, squared. Well, 3 minus 0 is 3, and 5 minus 0 is 5. 3 squared is 9, and 5 squared is 25. And 25 plus 9 is 34. So I have the square root of 34. And that's 2 times 17, neither of which has a factor twice, so I can't simplify it any. So I'm just going to leave it as the square root of 34. Now, when I said D, that's not to be confused with diameter. That's the distance. And in this case, it's the distance from the origin, the center, and contains some 0.35, which means what I actually have here is not D, diameter, but radius. And so my circle is x squared plus y squared, because we're just following the formula for a circle centered at the origin. We just need that radius squared. Now, since the radius is the square root of 34, when I square it, it's just 34. And that would be the equation of this circle. And then we have example 3, find the center and radius of a circle given the equation. Now, for this, I'm going to ask you to remember that if I have x squared plus, let's say, 8x, we're going to do this thing called completing the square. So we're going to do that so that we can factor. So I'm going to say plus some number. And for that, we're going to take this value from, remember, ax squared plus bx plus c. We're going to take this b value, and we're going to take half of it. So 8, half of that would be 4. And then we're going to square it. We're going to take that 4 and square it, and we get 16. And so we're adding 16 on here. Now, the reason we would do this is so that we can write it as x plus, in this case, 4 squared. This is equal to this thing after we have completed the square. All right, let's look at how that helps us here. So first, I'm going to take these two parts here together, x squared and my minus 6x, plus some number, and then I'm going to take these two and put them together, plus y squared plus 2y, and I'm going to add that something together, and then minus 6. I'm going to go ahead and add that 6 onto both sides. So when I do that, that cancels the 6 and leaves 6 over here on the right. And then I'm going to ask myself, what do I add? So half of minus 6. Half of minus 6 would be minus 3. And then I take minus 3 and I square it. And that's going to be equal to 9. So I'm going to add 9 here. And that, we'll come back to that here in just a second. But over here, I'm going to do the same thing with this 2. 2 divided by 2 equals 1. And then I'm going to take 1 and square it, and that gives me 1. So I'm going to add 1 here. Now, let's think about this for just a second. If I'm adding 9 and I'm adding 1, that means to the left-hand side, I have added 9 plus 1 or 10. So I have to then also add 10 to this side, which is just these two added together. Adding 9, adding 1 is adding 10 to the left, and then I've added 10 to the right, and that's what I've got. And so then I can rewrite this as x minus 3 squared, taking this minus 3 was half of my b value, and so that's what I put here, minus 3. And then I'm going to put plus over here, plus y plus 1 squared, which you recall was this. We had 2 divided by 2, which is 1, and then we had 1 squared, which is 1, and it's this 1 right here that we're putting inside the parentheses here. This 1 right here, half of our b value that we're adding on here. And then all of this is equal to the other side. 6 plus 10 is 16. So then I can say my center is at 3. It's the opposite. So x minus h is 3, and y minus negative 1. So 3, negative 1. And then my radius that's 16 is the same as 4 squared, so my radius is 4. And that's the way that looks. Let's look at B. We're going to do the same thing again. We're going to take our x terms, put them together. X squared plus 8x plus, we'll leave this open right here, plus something, plus y squared. And then there's no other y term, so we're just going to leave it as plus y squared. And then minus 7. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. So this is equal to, those cancel, and it's equal to negative 7. So here I'm thinking, I go over here, 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So what I'm going to add on is 16, but I have to add it over here also, 16. And that allows me to say, okay, well, x then is x plus 4 squared plus y. Now, if you want to, because there's nothing with that y squared, I didn't have to complete the square because I could just think of it as y minus 0 squared. But most of the time we don't write y minus 0 squared. We would just write y squared is equal to, and then negative 7 plus 16 is 9. And so our center, I say x minus h, but x plus 4 is not, that's not subtraction. So I think I can rewrite it as x minus negative 4. And so my center is at negative 4. And then y doesn't have anything with it. So y minus what squared is equal to y squared? Well, y minus 0. So my k value is 0. And then finally my radius is something squared equals 9, then that would be 3 squared is 9. And that's what the center and radius of this thing is. All right. Practice, practice, practice. You're going to do great. Have a good afternoon.